Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, guys. I hope all of you guys are well and I hope the sound is working this time. Yesterday I tried to use something called OBS, which is a kind of platform that you can use for streaming. And it's supposed to be kind of good, but it's not the best one you can get. It's, it's like they say Guzara, you can do your job with it. But it's actually useful for, because before I used to teach Ajurumiyya, if you guys remember, and it was useful for that. So the Ajurumiyya, it was something that helped me a lot to be able to teach on Facebook as well. So anyway, let me just try and live. See, the problem is this kind of makes it a bit slower. Wa alaikum assalam, Tahmid Sab. Let me try to get the live stream sort of why it doesn't. So anyway, as I was saying, so the topic I'm going to be just touching upon today was waiting for this post Juma live stream. Oh, Juma live stream, yeah, that's the way, man, that's the way. Now I can't seem to share the link for this. Yeah, can't seem to share the links for this. But anyway, how has your Juma been? How you guys been doing your Juma? Juma been good? Stream slows down the computer a lot. This OBS does. Let me just see if I can. Wa alaikum assalam, Toib Mir. Is that how I say your name? Toib Mir. I apologize if I'm saying it totally wrong. Okay. Is this working? Is it not? Unknown error was a nice khutbah by Sheikh Zahir. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Sheikh Zahir. I wasn't here today, so I didn't hear it. It should be uploaded. I think they usually upload it. Okay, so let me just. Okay. Wa alaikum assalam, Sister Aisha. Okay, so finally got this. Anyway, so what I wanted to mention today to you guys is about the importance of learning Arabic poetry when it comes to the Quran. The reason for that is because you have to remember the Quran is in the Arabic language, and it's more specifically the Arabic language that was spoken, in the Arabian Peninsula 1,400 years ago. So the way they understood words, the expressions that they understood, the meanings that they got, the kind of emotions that they felt with the sentences, which each subtle different kind of way the sentences are structured. Sometimes you have a sentence that's jumla fi'liya, sometimes jumla ismiya, sometimes one word is here, one word is there. All of these play a role in giving a good strong meaning. So yesterday I was actually writing up this whole big thing on this late at night. I was just writing up on my thoughts on how we understand the Quran, and how a lot of people who learn Arabic language, they feel that they understand the Quran, but they're really only understanding it at a very surface level. It's a very basic, superficial sort of understanding of the Quran. And it's basically like someone who reads the translation and just understands. So they don't kind of appreciate the deep richness of the Quran, the deep meanings, the way that it impacts people, and it just sounds like the way we speak to each other, English, for example, or whatever language you speak to each other. We look at that. So this is why it's extremely important. If a person really wants to understand the Quran, they need to focus on understanding the way Arabic was spoken and try and kind of immerse themselves in the Arabic. Once you immerse yourself in the Arabic for a long time, you understand. So let me give you an example. So let's say you want to go and live in Japan. So in Japan, let's say you've got your Google Translator, and so if you take your Google Translator and you aim it at any sort of Japanese text, it will give you the translation of it. But you see, it only gives you translation, and the feelings that you get in your language of that particular translation, that's all you're going to get. You won't be able to appreciate Japanese poetry. Yeah, and poetry is like the kind of the meter for being able to understand any language. If you can understand the poetry of any language, that tells you you're in touch with the meaning of that language. Yeah, that's like a very sort of like a clear thing, and that's why the word shi'r, poetry in Arabic, means shi'r. It's from the word shi'r, which means like shu'ur, senses. You sense it in yourself. You kind of feel it. You embrace it. So now this person who lives amongst Japanese and he's been there with them for many years and slowly begins to understand how they say things, and when they say a certain thing, do they mean like a joke by it, or do they mean something serious, or when they say something, if they're angry or if they're upset or if they're happy or if they're sad, how they say different things. Each sentence that comes out of a person's mouth in different situations is obviously going to have a different emotion. So this is why if you want to understand the Quran properly, you must understand classical Arabic poetry. This is not to say that if you learn Arabic, you'll be able to kind of figure out, you understand what Allah is saying in the Quran. You know that. So you'll have enough Arabic basically, if you do like a course, a 1-year course or 2-year course, to understand what Allah is saying. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, all praise to Allah, Lord of the world. You understand that. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, you'll understand that. But you won't get beyond that. You won't be able to understand the language as it was being understood, the richness, the emotions attached to it. So this is why the importance of Arabic poetry, as I was saying, is crucial. In fact, many of the scholars have even said a lot of the issues that were raised amongst Muslims, academic sort of issues in Aqidah and other things, was simply because as time went by, there was a drop in the understanding of the Arabic language. So in the time of Sahaba, you rarely had anyone had any issue with anything that was specifically in the Quran. Yeah. So because you rarely had any issue with that. Like if you look in the days of Sahaba, you rarely have any sort of Sahabi or Sahaba who differ on main sort of Aqidah issues or issues in the Quran. Yeah. And if there was some sort of issue, it was easily dealt with because they understood the language. They knew what the language meant. They knew what istawa al-arsh meant. They knew what the hand of Allah meant. They all understood the language. The problem is, as time went by, because the level of language dropped, yeah. So imagine you're on step number 10, which is basically you understand the Arabic language as best as possible in the time of Sahaba. So as years were going back, they were stepping down, until eventually there was, a very low understanding, you can say, or a very diluted understanding of the Arabic language. And then other languages influenced people. Yeah, so the other languages, they were like, so for example, I speak English here. So the English language, the way I understand English affects the way I understand Arabic. So I'm like taking my understanding of English, the way sentences are structured, the way jokes are said in English, the way we have, certain subtle statements that we make, and we're using that, and I'm using that to kind of figure out my Arabic. So then we get stuck. The problem is when we read the Quran, so let's say I'm reading the Quran now. So I'm reading the Quran. The Quran just seems to be like a book that was never taken as a kind of as a guide of life. It was always looked at like, scientifically, like a textbook. So imagine you got a textbook on maths or a textbook on biology or a textbook on any other subject. The way people look at that book, it's not a living book. It's just a book of reference. So eventually what tends to happen is if a student does not understand, doesn't immerse themselves in the Arabic language of the days of the Quran, they'll see the Quran as another textbook in life. And they'll just study the Quran from the aspect of it being a source of Islam, and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually what we do for fiqh. We have to use that. We have to use it for aqidah, for tafsir and all sorts. But the main thing is that we're not going to appreciate how things are said in Arabic. Yeah. So this is why extremely important to understand how the point. And I'll give you an example of this. It's like when you're studying Arabic, right? You need to know how certain things are described in Arabic. Like when Arabs describe horses, why mention them? For example, there's a surah وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا فَالْمُغِيرَاتِ صُبْحًا. So this chapter, Al-Adiyat, it's about horses, but for an English reader, I might be thinking, what's horses? Why all of a sudden mention horses in this book? What does horses have that I can benefit? I mean, I've ridden a horse, right? So I know how horses are. But as in, what relationship is there between horses and me understanding the Quran? The problem is, the way I'm looking at it is, I'm looking at it from an English speaker's and a person who's been living in the West, their perspective. But if you think about a person 1,400 years ago whose life revolved around these kind of things, horses and camels and other things, so they understand when you kind of giving an example, or if you're talking about a certain aspect of a horse, they straight away it clicks to them. Today's time, for example, maybe I would understand cars really good. Yeah, I would understand computers really good. I would understand software very good. I would understand other things that are happening in our time. Mobile phones, for example. So mobile phone in today's times would be a center of conversation for many like circles. Maybe football matches. Football matches would be a center of conversation. So if in a 500 years time someone came and they looked at some of our conversations we have on the WhatsApp groups, and they're thinking, well, why do they always mention football for? How is football relevant to our time? And this is why I was saying the poetry is very important, because it opens up to the reader, exposes them to more feelings, it exposes them to more expressions in the Arabic language. Now, when they go back to the Quran, everything just clicks in. It just makes sense. Yeah, and that's what I thought I just mentioned to you guys. Anyway, if you guys got any questions, you can put your questions. So I'm doing a course, a series, inshallah, on the Arabic language, and I've started and I've done history part 1, history part 2, there's going to be part 3 as well, hopefully this weekend. But I'm also going to be doing more on poetry as well. I'm doing my Diwan al-Shafi'i, but I think a lot of you guys are not really kind of familiar with understanding the Arabic language. So that's why I'm gonna do on English as well. So I'm gonna do some poetry, but I'm gonna do it from an English medium. Okay, so questions. Right, so alaikum salam. Why don't you upload videos of Mukhtasar al-Quduri? I have. If you go to my video, if you go to my channel, Mukhtasar al-Quduri, I've got a whole playlist. I'm uploading slowly. Every week I upload one video. So check that out, Brother Tayyib. Okay, Sister Aisha, how do you explain that Prophet is not Hazir Nazir? So the issue of Hazir Nazir, it depends what you mean by Hazir Nazir. Like if you mean, for example, like Allah, the Prophet ﷺ is like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, omnipresent. So he is everywhere at the same time. So this is the sifat, the quality of Allah. We can't give it to anyone else, which obviously you can't attribute to the Prophet. But if you mean as though Hazir Nazir, like you say to someone, you know what, whatever you do, I'll know about it. So when you say to someone, whatever you do, I'll know about it, it doesn't mean you're not saying to them that you're everywhere. It just means that the news will reach me. So this is why some of the early like people would say things like, if you kind of say something, the Prophet ﷺ will get to know about it. The Prophet ﷺ, we believe all prophets are alive in their graves, and this is Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah belief. However, the question is that how will this information reach him? So we know if you're standing by the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and you give him salam, Allah allows the Prophet ﷺ to hear. And if you're far away, the narration mentions that angels will reach it to them as well. But does the Prophet ﷺ know everything that's happening in the world? This is something which, the evidences, the categorical evidence don't seem to indicate towards that. So that is something which I would agree with. Okay, what's your thoughts on New Zealand incident? I mean, what's my thoughts? Is obviously it's a bad thing. Yeah, it's a very bad thing, disgusting. Whether Muslims do, people who are calling themselves Muslims do extremist sort of, attacks, or whether non-Muslims do it, it's all barbaric. May Allah protect all people around the world, and especially Muslims, from such zulm. Zulm, it comes down to oppression. Yeah, people just got a gun, and they're going around just using that gun on other people, which obviously on the Day of Judgment, Allah is going to take these people to account and question them about it, and Allah will punish them. Allah is the one who deals with these people. So anyway, okay, so any other questions, guys? No questions. You guys got no questions for me? So okay, if there's no questions, then yeah, anyway, so jazakallah khair for your attending today, mashallah, for listening to me. And if you do have any sort of questions in the future, let me know, and any sort of videos you guys want me to make. The thing is, obviously, I'm restricted to how much I can do. So this is why when you guys give me ideas about what kind of videos to make, what kind of series to start, I've got to look at priority as well. I've got to look at what is going to be the most effective thing, and also I've got to look at time as well. So which one would be more time consuming as well. How can we answer the objection? What objection is that? Okay. I'm not sure. Objection. Extreme. I'm not sure what objection you're referring to. Okay. So anyway, Jazakumullah khair. I've got badminton. I've got to go badminton soon. Oh, the ijaz of the Quran and its challenge may be met in the future. I mean, okay, make video for Muslim motivation of studying. That's a good idea. Yeah, I can possibly make that. I mean, the whole concept of ijaz is like a very big discussion of ijaz. I'm thinking of making a video. I was not making some notes because it's a very big topic, and there's lots of different things that people generally, the average person, when they're told that the Quran is the ijaz of the Quran, they just think that, they'll take the expert's statement for it. As in, the expert has said that this is ijaz of Quran, and they'll leave it there. But for the student of knowledge and the person who's really intrigued about this and maybe gets asked by non-Muslims, how is it a miracle? How can I not replicate this? This obviously requires a person to look into the different ways that the Quran is considered to be a miracle. Yeah, so there are, like Imam al-Baqilani has listed about, I think it's about 13 different ways that he mentions how the Quran is a miracle and how scholars discuss this. Is it from a linguistic aspect? Is it from the content itself? Is it from the way that the laws have been presented? Is it in the way that the past has been mentioned? Precision in wording? Is it in the way that science has been described in it in very great detail? Is it in the way that it captivates people? Is it in the way that no Arab at that time ever thought of such expressions? So there are, lots of different things that have to be looked at if you want to understand the ijaz of the Quran. And in reality, like many of the early scholars, like Ibn Suraqa, he says that it's actually the ijaz of the Quran in every era is something which is new. That's what they say. And I think that's a very good argument. Like some people will use mathematical things, some will use language. Personally, I think that for as someone serious academically, someone wants to go and investigate and study these kind of things, for them, it's obviously it's a bigger journey. Yeah, because they have to, for example, if you want to know that the Quran is a scientific miracle, you will have to study science yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to be relying upon some scientific expert and he could be wrong. And you'll also have to try and understand how the Quran uses those words. Yeah. Some possibly might argue, okay, it's actually the language, the way that the language. But the problem with the issue with the language is if you don't understand how the Arabs used to speak, then you won't be able to tell the difference between like some classical poets and between the Quran. Yeah, they sound different, but you wouldn't be able to tell in the structure of the wording, in the sentences, why one is better than the other. You wouldn't be, unless you obviously just rely upon some expert again. That's what I was saying in the beginning. A lot of the concept of ijaz of the Quran is many people just relying upon what experts have said. Okay, but this requires a great study. I would say there has to be a great study, and I don't think anyone's done something really good in English. That's why I was thinking of doing a series on the ijaz of the Quran and going through all the different ways ijaz has been mentioned and how this can be seen in the Quran, and how people have brought their objections against these different ways and how it's been answered. Yeah, so okay. Next, is the Quran in the Torah? What's the difference? Is the Quran in the Torah? So the thing with the Torah is, if you mean by the Torah the first 5 books of the Old Testament, so the Old Testament, the first 5 books in the Bible, the Old Testament, if that's the Torah, then if you read the Torah, basically the Torah is just telling a story from the beginning all the way to the end, and it's very kind of chronological. Yeah, it kind of goes through it, that in the beginning there was this Berish bara Elohim Hashemayim al ard. That's the first opening verse of the Torah. In the beginning, God created the skies and the earth. Yeah, and then it goes on from there. And then he goes to the story of Adam alayhi salam, and then he mentions like various different things that happened, and then he goes to say what happened in Nuh alayhi salam. Then he goes through like that. It's not like this, the Quran. The Quran is very different. The Quran is not chronological, and the Quran, the way that the Quran presents like the ayats, the content, is a very sort of like sophisticated way. As in, you'd have to read the Quran multiple times and understand the Arabic language to be able to appreciate how the Quran is like sequencing the events. Yeah, so this is why if you read the Torah, my advice would be read the first 5 books of the Old Testament, see how that is, and then you read a translation of the Quran. You can clearly see a lot of differences between them. Yeah, I mean, we can't guarantee that the Torah has been preserved. That's one of the biggest problems that there is, that we can't guarantee, like the preservation of the Quran. There is no system of preservation of the Bible, or the at least the first 5 books. Yeah, they have it in Hebrew, but there's no guarantee that somewhere in history someone didn't make any sort of alterations to it, or added some extra words to it, or a certain version of it became more popular and then it changed. Okay, so how different religion evolved in the world except Islam, like Hindu? How different religions evolved? I mean, I'm not an expert on religion, so I wouldn't be comfortable answering that kind of question. I mean, I only kind of answer if I know something. If I feel I know something, I'll try to answer it. So I don't know how religions evolved. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, everything evolves. Businesses evolve, societies evolve, ideas evolve. So I suppose that's maybe what happened to religions in the past. People began to take religions and take them literal in the beginning, and then slowly they started to make them metaphorical. Eventually, it just became, something of in the mind. Really, for many religions, it's just a state that a person feels like going into. And Islam has been preserved. The thing with Islam is that it's been preserved, and it's very difficult for anyone to try and adjust anything in Islam and to kind of twist it, because the parameters are set, the Quran verses are there, and you can't really budge too much here or there when it comes to Quran. Yeah, and that's why the Quran is, Allah says in the Quran that He has preserved the Quran and He'll continue to preserve it. Okay, so Jazakallah khair, guys. Thank you very much for attending, and I will see you guys, inshallah, in the future sometime. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.